Hey everybody, and welcome back. So it's been a little while since I've done anything with the Corvair build, but we're back at it today because I finally got some parts in. So today, if you can see that there, I got the fifth bearing. So we're going to be mounting that up and getting this thing ready a little bit closer to putting it on that new plane that I showed you guys in the last video. So let's get to it. Hey, so before I go any farther, I can't stress this enough. This book right here is critically important to getting this done correctly. So make sure you pick one up from Fly with SPA. Now, let's get on to putting this fifth bearing on. So what I've done already is I've got the bearing here. I also picked up the installation kit, which includes these little pieces here that get the bearing into position. But what we have to do is we've got to get this dialed out so that it's less than 1/1000th of total run out. Once we get that, then there's some other processes to do, so let's just move through it. All right, so what's nice about their installation kit is everything comes pretty much labeled. So you got your dial indicator here, which you saw me just set up right over here. Dial indicator mount, which again tells you what you got. You got your reamers, spacers, drill guides, and then all the hardware you need right here. So everything's labeled. So now let's check the run out. So right down here in this hole, you can see right there's a little hole. There's a little hole here. Bigger hole here is where the bolts go through, but this little hole here, that's where the adjustment screw is for the fifth bearing. So that's how you adjust the run out. So you just got to play with it a little bit back and forth until you get the run out to be less than 1/1000th. All right, now that I got the run out set correctly, the next thing I do is I got to take those screws out that I told you about they're used for adjusting it, put Loctite on them, reinstall them, and they're never coming out again. All right, so let's move on to that step. All right, so the next step is pretty simple. I've got these aluminum pins, and they go in the original dowel holes. And the reason that we're putting them there is we're going to be putting new dowel pins in for the bearing housing itself. So next part, offering the housing up. So let me grab that. And here's the fifth journal bearing housing. Pretty cool. This is the Gen 1. Now what they do is they have these little pieces of tape here on the back, and these are sized for the clearance fit that your bearing has to your housing. And if you notice, they all have a stamped number. So this is bearing 476, and I got the same stamping here on the bearing itself. So all right, so that is the first look of the bearing offered up to the engine. So now we got to do a little more work. We got dowel pins to put in. Plus we got to get everything mounted up, squared up, and all right, so you can see I've got the upper and the lower drill guides installed. But one little trick that is in the manual that you need to look for is in here you have your little spacer films, and you need to be able to see these popping out. Otherwise they could be bound up inside and you won't have this as concentric as you could. So I was thinking maybe, just maybe, instead of just drilling and letting all the shavings go potentially back in the engine, maybe I should just cover it up and instead of just vacuuming it up like they said later. But anyways, back to drilling. All right, now I got to install these little dowel pins. So those two block off plates that I put in before, that's where these go. So we're going to put just a touch of Loctite on them. Then we just tap them into place. All right, this stuff here is anaerobic sealer. This is what's going to be the gasket between our fifth bearing and the engine case. So time to put this on, a little bit of oil, and let's get the whole thing bolted on. All right, so we got the bearing now on. Now we just got to bolt it up. It's all indexed. One thing about this anaerobic sealer that you put on here, you got to be real careful not to put too much on. If you put too much on, it'll actually squeeze out and get into the cam and can interact with the cam and the cam gear and the crank bearing. So always be careful when you put those in. All right, let's torque this thing up. So putting in the oil seal, got a little tip from Dan Weisman. That is, take one of these little plastic covers, use this around the bearing itself to help slide the oil seal on. All right, let's do it. So everybody, it is the next day. As you can see, I got the 5th bearing put on. Now let's get the pistons on and make some real progress today. So one of the things about getting the pistons in is each one of these pistons, cylinders, if you look here, have a number stamped into them. This is where they existed for when the engine was put together. So all of the stress loads and everything were for cylinder 1. So we always want to match these up. So if you notice, there's not a stamp on the bottom, but there is that stamp on the top. See if you can see it. You see that? Yeah, there it is. See the stamp? So that's telling me that this one here is for cylinder number 1. So that is this position here. So now let's get started installing all these cylinders. All right, so we got the first cylinder in, cylinder number 1. I'm just keep on moving and see how many of these I can get in the next little while. All right, all the cylinders and pistons are installed. Starting to finally look like an engine. All right, let's see what else we can get in. Maybe, just maybe, we get the heads on. All right, so the next step before we get the heads on is I need to put in the lifters. These are hydraulic lifters, and they look real familiar for you Chevy guys because they're pretty much the same ones you put in a small black Chevy. These are 817s, I believe. All right, so let's get these in. And let's get the head mocked up. All right, so I have one more task I can get done today because the rest of the tools I need are sitting down at the airport. I'm going to put in the push rod tubes. After that, next time, we're going to torque all the heads together. Here we go, ready to go. All I've done is kind of mocked them up with these screws on top. So, all right, let's install those push rod tubes. All right, everybody, so that's a lot of work done. We got this engine pretty much together. A little more work and we'll get it ready to go. Now, on top of that, see you guys next time, but there's somebody here that wants to say hi.
Hi. Hi.
All right, see you guys next time. Bye.